Chapters 31 and 32 of Napoleon and Josephine, The Rise of the Empire, by Walter Geer. This recording is in the public domain. 31. 1810. Aix-les-Bains and Geneva. The last week in April, 1810, Napoleon left Compiègne with Marie Louise for a visit of 5 weeks to Belgium. Madame de la Tour du Pin, the wife of the French prefect at Brussels at that time, has given us in her Recollections a striking picture of the young Empress, whom she saw frequently while the court was at Laeken. She says that Marie Louise was insignificant, absolutely devoid of intelligence, and entirely unworthy of the great man whose destiny she shared; that she seemed to make it a point to be as disagreeable as possible to every one with whom she came in contact. The new Empress was no more popular at Paris, where Josephine was more and more regretted. During the absence of the Emperor, Josephine held a regular court at Malmaison. The crowd rushed there, all the more eager because their Majesties were at Antwerp, and they had no fear of displeasing Marie Louise. The astute courtiers always perceived signs of a return to power of the old favorite. The Emperor had invited Eugène to accompany him, and during the journey had treated him with marked distinction. Josephine had discreetly revealed to her confidential friends that she had received from the Emperor a letter full of affection, in which he gave her permission to remain at Malmaison even after the return of the court to St. Cloud, and promised to pay her an early visit. This letter, which bears no date, runs as follows: To the Empress Josephine at Malmaison. Mon ami, I am in receipt your letter. Eugène will give you news of my trip and of the Empress. I highly approve of your going to the waters, and hope they will do you good. I much desire to see you. If you are at Malmaison at the end of the month, I will come to see you. I count upon being at St. Cloud the 30th of the month. My health is very good. I lack nothing but the knowledge that you are contented and well. Let me know the name that you would like to assume en route. Never doubt the entire sincerity of my affection for you. It will endure as long as I live. You would be very unjust not to believe it. Napoleon. At this time Josephine was very anxious about her daughter. After the stay of the court at Compiègne, the Emperor had ordered Hortense to go to Amsterdam to rejoin her husband, with whom she had not lived since the birth of Louis Napoleon 2 years before. Her health was still very bad, and she complied with the Emperor's order with great reluctance. The letters of Josephine during the month of May all manifest her great anxiety, and express her desire that Hortense should accompany her to the waters, either to Aix-la-Chapelle, her first idea, or to Aix-les-Bains, in Savoie, where she finally decided to go. The condition of Hortense finally became so alarming that, at the end of May, her husband consented to her going to Plombières. Napoleon's promised visit to Malmaison finally took place on the 13th of June, 12 days after his return to St. Cloud. In a letter to her daughter written the following day, Josephine records her joy. To Queen Hortense at Plombières, Malmaison, 14 June, 1810. My dear Hortense, you ask me what I am doing. I had an hour of happiness yesterday. The Emperor came to see me. His presence made me happy, although it renewed my sorrows. Such emotions one would willingly go through often. All the time that he stayed with me I had sufficient courage to keep back the tears which I felt were ready to flow, but after he was gone I could not keep them back, and I became very unhappy. He was kind and amiable to me as usual, and I hope that he read in my heart all the affection and all the devotion for him which fills me. I spoke to him about your position, and he listened to me with interest. He thinks that you should not return again to Holland, the King not having behaved as he ought to have done. The Emperor's advice, therefore, is that you should take the waters for the necessary time, and that you should write to your husband that the advice of the physicians is that you should live in a warm climate for some time, and in consequence you are going to Italy, to your brother's. As for your son, he will give orders that he is not to leave France. Your son, who is here just now, is very well. He is pink and white. Josephine. A few days later, on the 18th of June, Josephine set out for Aix-les-Bains, traveling under the name of the Comtesse d'Arbourg, and accompanied only by 4 members of her household. She had chosen this place in preference to her old resort Plombières, because her health required distraction above all, and she hoped to find more of that in a place which she had not yet seen, and whose situation was picturesque. Also because the waters are especially renowned for the nerves. The Empress occupied a modest habitation with Madame d'Audenarde, and the rest of her attendants were lodged in a small adjoining house. A week after her arrival she was rejoined by Madame de Rémusat. At Aix, Josephine led a very simple life. Bathing, excursions, reading the latest novels from Paris, dinner at 8 o'clock, on account of the heat, a little music or a game afterwards, so passed her days. She had arrived before the opening of the season, but as soon as her presence was known visitors began to come from all the neighboring towns in France, Switzerland, and northern Italy. On the 10th of July she had a short visit from her son, who was on his way to Milan. Eugène had recently been made by the Emperor Hereditary Grand Duke of Frankfort, which was generally assumed to be the end of any expectations that he might become King of Italy. It was rumored that Napoleon intended to unite Italy to the Empire, and that Eugène would cease to be his adopted son when he had a son of his own. Josephine feared that he would cease to be Viceroy at the same time that Hortense descended from the throne of Holland. This event had just been announced to her in a letter from the Emperor. To the Empress Josephine, at Aix. Rambouillet, 8 July, 1810. Mon Ami, I have received your letter of the 3rd July. You will have seen Eugène, and his presence will have done you good. I have learned with pleasure that the waters have benefited you. The King of Holland has just abdicated the crown, leaving the regency to the Queen, in accordance with the Constitution. He has departed from Amsterdam and left the Grand Duke de Berg. I have united Holland to France. But this act is fortunate in that it emancipates the Queen, and this unfortunate girl is going to return to Paris with her son, the Grand Duke de Berg. That will make her entirely happy. My health is good. I have come here to hunt for several days. I shall see you with pleasure this autumn. Never doubt my friendship. I never change. Take good care of your health. Be gay, and believe in the sincerity of my affections. Napoleon. Although Josephine in her letters to Hortense complains of her quiet surroundings, and speaks of her melancholy, her life at Aix seems to have been quite gay. The only incident which produced any excitement was the narrow escape which she had from death on a visit to the Abbey of Hautecombe, when a sudden storm on the lake nearly caused her boat to founder. This is referred to in a letter from Napoleon at Trianon. I have heard with anxiety the danger which you ran. For a child of the isles of the ocean to perish in a lake would be a catastrophe. On her return to Aix from this excursion, which had so nearly proved fatal, Josephine found a chamberlain of Queen Hortense, who announced her arrival on the following day. The meeting of the mother and daughter was very affecting. The similarity in their situations had produced a new bond of sympathy between them. At the time of her arrival, Hortense was ill both in body and soul, threatened with consumption, and absolutely worn out and discouraged. But in spite of all her troubles, she was her usual amiable self, and proved a great consolation to her mother. It was at this time that Hortense was brought into intimate contact with Charles de Flahault, whose social accomplishments had made him a great favorite with Josephine. Their intimacy resulted 15 months later in the birth of the future Duc de Morny, so well known under the Second Empire. The visit of Hortense was very short, as she was ordered by the Emperor to return to Fontainebleau and rejoin her 2 sons. She was therefore unable, as she wished, to accompany her mother on her tour of Switzerland during the months of September and October. Leaving Aix the 1st of September, Josephine went to Secheron, a small village in the suburbs of Geneva. She made this her headquarters during the 2 following months, while she visited all the principal points of interest in Switzerland. As she was never fond of traveling, the only explanation of her course at this time is the report which had just reached her of the condition of Marie Louise. We find the first mention of the subject in a letter to her daughter. To Queen Hortense at Aix. Secheron, 9 September, 1810. My dear Hortense, I have not heard from the Emperor, but I thought that I ought to prove to him the interest which I take in the pregnancy of the Empress. I have just written him on the subject. I hope that this step will put him at his ease, and that he will be able to speak to me about it with a confidence as great as my attachment for him. Adieu, my dear daughter. I tenderly embrace you. Josephine. As usual, Josephine's letter to the Emperor is not extant, but his reply is given in Queen Hortense's collection. To the Empress Josephine at Aix. Saint Cloud, 14 September, 1810. Mon ami, I am in receipt your letter of the 9 September. I am pleased to learn that you are well. The Empress is, in fact, grosse de 4 mois. She is in good health, and much attached to me. Adieu, mon ami. Do not doubt my interest in you, and my affection for you. Napoleon. This correspondence seems to furnish a sufficient explanation of Josephine's restlessness. She now showed a great desire to cancel the programme which she herself had submitted to the Emperor in the spring, and to return at once to Malmaison. She evidently wrote Napoleon on the subject, for we have his reply. To the Empress Josephine, at Geneva, Fontainebleau, 1 October, 1810. I have received your letter. Hortense, whom I have seen, will have told you what I think. Go to see your son this winter. Come back to the waters of Aix next year, or else stay at Navarre for the spring. I would advise you to go to Navarre at once, if I did not fear that you would grow weary there. My opinion is that you could only spend the winter conveniently at Milan or Navarre, but I do not wish in any way to put you out. Adieu, mon ami. Be contented, and do not lose your head. Never doubt my affections. Napoleon. Josephine returns to the same subject in 2 letters to her daughter, from Berne, the following month. To Queen Hortense, at Fontainebleau, Berne, 12 October, 1810. My dear Hortense, not a word from you in the 20 days since our separation. What does your silence mean? If in 3 days from now I do not receive letters telling me what to do, I shall think that the Emperor has not approved the request which I made of him. I shall leave for Geneva. From Geneva I shall return to Malmaison. Then at least I shall be in France, and if all the world deserts me I shall dwell there alone, conscious of having sacrificed my happiness to make that of others. Josephine. Berne, 13 October, 1810. My dear Hortense, I am to-day in receipt your letter of the 4th. After having reflected well, I shall follow the Emperor's first idea, and shall establish myself at Navarre. It seems to me very unsuitable to go to Italy, especially in the winter. If it were for a visit of 1 or 2 months I should gladly go to see my son, but to stop there longer is impossible. All that you tell me of the interest which the Emperor still has in me gives me pleasure. I have made for him the greatest of sacrifices, the affections of my heart. I am sure that he will not forget me, if he says to himself sometimes that another person would never have had the courage to make such a sacrifice. I would like to receive another line from you before arranging my departure for Navarre, in order to be sure that the Emperor approves of my passing the winter in that place. Speak to me frankly on that point. I confess to you that if I were obliged to remove from France for more than a month, I should die of grief. At Navarre, at least I shall have the pleasure of seeing you sometimes. Josephine. This revelation of the deep affection of Josephine for Napoleon in the confidence of an intimate personal letter to her daughter, seems a sufficient answer to those writers who have frequently expressed doubts of her sincerity. Upon her return to Geneva the 21st of October, Josephine found a note from the Emperor, and at once wrote Hortense to announce her final plans. To Queen Hortense, at Fontainebleau, Geneva, no date, 1810. The Emperor has written me a very amiable little letter. You can judge, my dear Hortense, what pleasure it has given me. The Emperor advises me to go to Milan or Navarre. I have decided for Navarre. You will find me much changed, my dear daughter. The past month I have grown quite thin, and I feel that I need rest, and above all that the Emperor does not forget me. Adieu, my dear Hortense. I have just written the Emperor. I advise him that I count upon leaving Geneva the 1st of November, that I shall go to Malmaison for 24 hours. You will be very kind if you come there to make me a little visit. After that I shall go to stay at Navarre. Let me know if this arrangement suits the Emperor. Josephine. While she was still at Berne, or soon after her return to Geneva, Josephine received a very long letter from Madame de Rémusat, in which, with many flattering phrases, she mingles the advice not to return to Paris. The letter bears no date, but was probably written early in October, 1810. The note of Paul de Rémusat, in which he assigns the date to the last of 1812 or the beginning of 1813, is absurd. This letter is quoted at length in the collection of Queen Hortense and in many of the biographies, but it hardly deserves so much space. Apparently Josephine had wished to meet Marie Louise, but Madame de Rémusat assures her that the time has not yet come for such a step. Then follow long details to show the jealousy of Marie Louise. Among those whom the writer had seen was Duroc, the Grand Marshal of the palace. From him she gathered that Josephine had still further sacrifices to make. May you not find, in the course of a rather more prolonged journey, pleasures which you do not foresee at first? At Milan there awaits you the sweet spectacle of a son's merited success. Florence and Rome too would gratify your tastes. You would encounter at every step in Italy memories which the Emperor would see recalled with no vexation, for to him they are connected with the epoch of his earliest glories. There is much more in the same strain, and it is evidently Napoleon who is speaking through the mouth of Duroc. The Emperor, however, was too tenderly disposed towards Josephine to give her a positive order not to return to France, and she was not a woman to take a hint. Before leaving Geneva, Josephine purchased the Château of Prigny, on the edge of the lake facing Mont Blanc, for which she paid nearly 200,000 francs. After this final extravagance, she set out on the 1st day of November for her stay of 24 hours at Malmaison. Napoleon was still at Fontainebleau with Marie Louise, but his own return to the Tuileries was fixed for the 15th November. As Josephine was still at Malmaison at that date, the Emperor sent Cambacérès to hasten her departure. She protested that she could not leave without time to pack up, and it was not until the 22nd of November that she actually reached Navarre. 32. 1811 to 1812. Navarre, Malmaison, and Milan. During the absence of Josephine, the interior of the Château of Navarre had been restored as completely as possible, and refurnished in a simple manner, so that now it was quite habitable. It was still difficult to heat the immense oval salon which occupied the centre of the building. It was paved with marble, and lighted only by windows in the vestibule and openings pierced in the lofty dome above. But the architect had succeeded in arranging around this room a salon, a music room, and a card room. A number of comfortable if not very luxurious chambers had also been partitioned off for the members of the household. By burning an immense quantity of wood and coal in the fireplaces it was now possible to make the rooms fairly comfortable. Large sums had also been spent on the gardens and hothouses, and Navarre promised in time to become a second Malmaison. The household was much more numerous than before. Josephine had brought with her quite a number of young girls, as pretty as they were poor, who were supposed to possess some talents as musicians. The life at the château was nevertheless very monotonous. Josephine remained in her room until 11 o'clock, at which hour the déjeuner was served punctually. After this meal, which lasted 3/4 of an hour, the young people had music in the salon, while the older persons played cards or chess. In the afternoon there were promenades through the gardens and park, or drives in the forest of Evreux. If the weather was unfavorable, the time was passed in reading the latest novels, of which a box was received every week from Paris. At 4 o'clock every one was free, and Josephine went to her room, where she usually summoned one of her old intimates for a confidential chat. At 6 o'clock dinner was served, and there were always some invited guests from the city: the Prefect, the Mayor, and most frequently the Bishop, Monseigneur Beaulier. There was only one table, and the service was very luxurious. After dinner there was music, cards, and sometimes dancing. Josephine was fond of games, and played cards, backgammon, and billiards equally well. The evening usually ended at 11 o'clock, when every one retired. Josephine, whose health had always been good, had never been so well. She no longer suffered from the frequent headaches which were due mainly to the irregular hours of the Emperor. She began to grow stout, and for the first time in her life was obliged to wear a corset in place of the former brassière. Her only trouble was with her eyes, which her physician told her was due to her crying so much. "Nevertheless," she wrote to her daughter, "for some time past I only weep occasionally." The first of the year Hortense finally arrived for her long promised visit, but while Josephine received her with transports of joy, it was not the same with the other members of the household. The queen, with all her affectation of simplicity, was very rigorous on the point of etiquette, and insisted that her chamberlains should appear every evening in full uniform, and her ladies in décolleté gowns. Under the mild régime of Josephine every one had become somewhat careless, and court ceremonial had been more honoured in the breach than the observance. Therefore Hortense was generally regarded as a killjoy. It was quite different when Eugène came. He had always preserved his simple boyish manners, and was only too glad to escape from the tiresome etiquette he was obliged to maintain at Milan. He entered heartily into the games and pastimes of the young people, and was a universal favourite. His trunks were full of presents, which he distributed with a lavish hand, and this was the only way in which he recalled the fact that he was a prince. The day of St. Joseph fell in March, and on the 18th all the personages of the city came in carriages to Navarre to salute the Empress and wish her a happy fête day. In the evening there was a celebration at the château, and Josephine distributed presents. The following evening the Empress gave a ball in the grand salon, where a parquet floor had been laid for dancing over the marble tiles. On the 20th of March, to continue the festivities, the mayor gave a dinner in honour of the Empress. She sent all of the members of her household, but remained at home herself, as she was expecting news from Paris. In this way she missed the first notification of the great event. At the moment that the guests came out for dinner at 8 o'clock, a despatch was received from Paris announcing the birth of the King of Rome. Enthusiastic toasts were drunk, the bells were rung, and the cannon fired. Josephine, who was anxiously waiting at Navarre, heard the sound of the guns and the bells before the postmaster could reach her presence. He had been advised by the courier on his way to Cherbourg, had hastily donned his uniform and rushed to the château. When he communicated the news to Josephine he noticed at first a slight frown upon her face, then, recovering her usual gracious manner, she said, "The Emperor cannot doubt the lively interest that I take in an event which crowns his joy. He knows that I cannot separate myself from his destiny, and that his happiness will always make me happy." The following morning Eugène arrived at Navarre. The Emperor had had the delicate thought of sending him to tell Josephine all the details of the happy event. She immediately sent her felicitations, and on the 22nd of March received from the Emperor the following letter, sent by one of his pages: "To the Empress Josephine at Navarre. "Paris, 22nd March, 1811. "Mon ami, I have received your letter. I thank you. My son is big and healthy. I hope that he will do well. He has my chest, my mouth, and my eyes. I hope that he will fulfill his destiny. I am always well satisfied with Eugène. He has never caused me the slightest sorrow. Napoleon." By this tacit comparison of his son and Eugène the Emperor gave Josephine the greatest consolation in his power. By this association of the two names he practically assured her of the continuance of his protection and good will. In fact, although his letters had not been so frequent of late, Napoleon, when he wrote, had been as tender and as cordial as ever, even with a touch of humour. Thus he had written her in reply to her New Year's greetings: "They say that there are more women than men at Navarre." In a later letter he said: "I am well. I hope to have a son. I will let you know at once. When you see me you will find that my regard for you has not changed." The Emperor was soon to give her a new proof of his kindness, in sending her permission to spend the springtime at Malmaison, which he knew would give her the greatest possible pleasure. The middle of April, therefore, we find her with Eugène at Malmaison, where she stayed during the whole month of May. This visit is passed over in silence by nearly all the biographers of Josephine, who state that she remained at Navarre until the middle of September. About this time Josephine found herself once more in serious financial difficulties. In spite of the 2 millions she had received in 1811, she had debts to the amount of 1 million more, and no funds to complete her purchase of Preny, to pay for the repairs at Navarre, and meet her current bills. She was compelled to apply to the Emperor, who wrote her the following letter: "To the Empress Josephine, Trianon, 25 August, 1811. "I have received your letter. I see with pleasure that you are in good health. I am at Trianon for several days. I expect to go to Compiègne. My health is very good. Put your affairs in order. Do not spend more than 1.5 millions, and put as much aside every year. That will make a reserve of 15 millions in 10 years for your grandchildren. It is nice to be able to give them something and to be useful to them. Instead of that, I am told that you have debts. That would be very bad. Look after your affairs, and do not give to everybody who asks it. If you desire to please me, let me know that you have a large fund. Judge what a poor opinion I shall have of you if I know that you are in debt with an income of 3 millions. Adieu, mon ami. Take care of your health. Napoleon. This letter, number 227 in the Didot collection, bears the date of 25th of August, 1813, but this is plainly an error. That year Napoleon left Paris the middle of April for the campaign in Saxony, and did not return until the 9th of November. On the other hand, he was at the Trianon on the 25th of August, 1811, and that is undoubtedly the correct date. After a careful inquiry into Josephine's affairs, the report made to the Emperor showed that her situation was even worse than he expected, and on the 4th November he sent word to her intendant that he had allowed an additional sum of 1,000,000 francs for her dowry that year. 2 years later, on his return from the disastrous campaign of 1813, the Emperor sent at once for Mollien, the Minister of the Treasury, and in place of many subjects far more important he took up the finances of the Empress Josephine, the economies which she could and should make. "She can no longer count upon me to pay her debts," he said. "I no longer have the right to add anything to what I have done for her. The fate of her family must not rest only upon my head." Then he added in a low tone, as if speaking to himself, "Je suis mortel, et plus qu'un autre." When Mollien told him that Josephine had shed tears in the course of an interview he had with her, Napoleon exclaimed, "But she must not be allowed to weep." Immediately after this conference with Mollien, Napoleon wrote Josephine: "To the Empress Josephine, at Malmaison, Friday, 8 A.M., November, 1813. I am sending to learn how you are, for Hortense has told me that you were in bed yesterday. I have been annoyed with you on account of your debts. I do not wish you to have any. On the contrary, I hope that you will put 1,000,000 aside each year to give to your granddaughters when they are married. However, never doubt my friendship for you, and do not worry over this matter. Adieu, mon ami. Send me word that you are well. They tell me that you are getting as fat as a good farmer's wife of Normandy. Napoleon." As Masson says after recounting this incident, "N'est-il pas toujours le même, et elle toujours pareille?" One would think that this new financial crisis, coming after so many others, might have made Josephine, at least for a time, more reasonable, but such was not the case. While she was at Malmaison she sent for her old architect, Fontaine, to consult him about her plans for Navarre. She wanted to remove the dome, and change the château into an Italian villa, with a flat roof and a crown of balustrades. A month later she again sends for the architect. This time she has another plan: to construct at Malmaison a new château, with all the modern improvements. As this will be very costly, in order to provide the funds, she begs Fontaine to propose to the Emperor, if he finds an opportunity, an exchange of the palace of the Élysée against its value in money. This project did not displease Napoleon, who had often regretted his gift of the Élysée to Josephine. There was no privacy at the Tuileries, and he had deprived himself of the only residence in Paris where he and his family could take a little exercise. Josephine could not reside in the city, and for both of them it seemed an excellent arrangement. Napoleon was therefore inclined to welcome the proposal, but he did not care to add another 1,000,000 or 2 to the large sums he had already given the Empress. He accordingly made a counter proposition: an exchange of the Élysée for the Château of Laeken, a modern palace, richly furnished, and in perfect order, surrounded by a large park, and near an important city. He had purchased this property when First Consul in April, 1804, for about 1,000,000 francs, and had subsequently spent another 1,000,000 in alterations and additions. The château was considered to be one of the finest of the imperial residences, and was always kept in perfect order, ready for immediate occupancy. By a decree under date of 10th of February, 1812, the Emperor authorized the exchange, but Josephine never visited her new residence, even to take possession. In September, 1811, Josephine returned to Malmaison for the winter. The Navarre party, as it was called, was now in a flourishing condition, and the court of the Empress Josephine fairly rivaled that of the Empress Marie Louise. In the spring of 1812 she had the pleasure of a short visit from Eugène, who had been summoned from Milan to receive the orders of the Emperor regarding the coming war with Russia. Augusta was expecting another baby the last of July, and Eugène persuaded his mother to make her long-deferred visit to Milan, to be present on that occasion. In May she passed several days at Saint Leu with Hortense and her children. But she did not venture to start for Italy without the permission of the Emperor. From Danzig on the 8th of June he wrote, "I hope that the waters will do you good, and I shall be glad to see you on my return," but not a word about Italy. Finally, from Gobin on the 20th of June he wrote, "I do not see anything in the way of your going to Milan to be with the Vice Reine. You had better go there incognito. You will find it very hot." This letter did not reach the Empress until the 1st of July, and then again her departure was deferred for 2 weeks by news of the illness of one of her grandchildren at Aix-la-Chapelle. As this did not prove serious, Josephine finally set out on the 16th of July, and reached Milan 12 days later. Her letter to Hortense is worth quoting. To Queen Hortense at Aix-la-Chapelle, Milan, 28 July, 1812. I was very tired on my arrival here, my dear Hortense. The pleasure of seeing Augusta has revived me. Her health is very good, and her pregnancy is far advanced. I am with her at the Villa Bonaparte. I have Eugène's rooms. You can imagine all the pleasure it gave me to make the acquaintance of his little family. Your nephew is very strong, an infant Hercules. His sisters are extremely pretty. The elder is a beauty. She resembles her mother in the height of her forehead. The younger has a lively and clever face. She will be very pretty. I have received here 3 letters from Eugène, the last under the date of the 13th July. His health is very good. He is still in pursuit of the Russians, without overtaking them. It is the general hope that the campaign will not be long. May this hope be realized. You do not speak of your health. I hope that the waters have done you good. It is the first prayer of a mother who loves you better than herself. Josephine. Only 3 days after Josephine's arrival there was a 4th grandchild, the future Empress Emilie of Brazil. Augusta, writes Josephine the same day, is perfectly well, and her daughter is superb, full of strength and health. Before she had been at Milan a week, Josephine was already uneasy, and anxious to leave for Aix-les-Bains. But she prolonged her stay for a month, because Madame Mère and her brother, Cardinal Fesch, were at the waters, and she did not wish to meet them. At Aix she found Julie, good and amiable as usual, with her sister, the former Désirée Clary, who was now the wife of Bernadotte, the Prince Royal of Sweden. After their departure at the end of September, she went to her château of Prigny for a short stay. A few days after her arrival she writes to Hortense, "I regret that you are not here with me. The weather is very fine. The views of the lake and of Mont Blanc are magnificent. It only lacks you at Prigny to appreciate with delight the full charm of a quiet life." On the 21st October her quiet life at Prigny came to an end, and Josephine set out for Malmaison, leaving the good people of Geneva quite content with her departure, as "the kind of life which we have led since she is here does not agree with our habitudes." End of chapters 31 and 32.